Tribe podcast on Ozpod Syndicate.
This too will pass. It's nothing is ever permanent. So there's no guarantees. And when you understand that there isn't anything permanent, you enjoy every single moment. So we make sure every single thing we do is fun. If it's not fun, we don't do it. And that's my entire team as well. If there's something that we want to do, that we need to do, and it isn't fun, we don't do it.
I agree.
Because even with that, there's some things that I won't find that are particularly fun. But if I've got the right people in place, somebody else, like let's say accounting, I don't find that particularly fun, but someone else will go, that's great. So everything will still get done if you've got the right people and if you understand that nothing is permanent.
Hello, Humanista. This is another episode of the Tribe podcast under Ozpod Syndicate. On today's episode, we're talking about, of course, we're still on entrepreneurship. We're talking about raising your children to be a young social enterprise, no matter how young. So that's an interesting topic. For today's guest is Susan Knapp, who is the founder of a social enterprise company called Into Ed Africa. Please welcome to the show, Susan. Hello, Susan. Thank you for your time.
Hi, Miko. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to meet you.
Thank you so much. So let's go back in time before you founded this Into Ed Africa. So what are you doing before you found this company?
I was doing many, many things. So in terms of profession, I was a teacher. In terms of life, I was a mother and still am a mother of 4. And in terms of where I lived, before I started Into Ed Africa, I have spent the last 25 years living outside of Australia, and I've been in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. So I grew up in Adelaide, Miko, and left Adelaide straight out of university and moved to Kenya, and never ever thought I would come back to Adelaide. It's taken me 25 years to get back. And it was just something that I'd always wanted to do ever since I was a kid. And the opportunity came up and I took it.
That's a big step. That's a big leap.
And looking back, it was probably bigger than it even seems now, because in those days when I did it, I was 21, we didn't have mobile phones. We didn't have internet. And I remember, I'll tell you really briefly a funny story. I remember that in order to call my mum here in Australia, I used to line up at a telephone booth. And there would be maybe 50 people lined up at this telephone booth. And I would wait for my mum to try and get a break in that call line from Australia for this telephone booth in Africa to answer. Wow. It's always a big step. Yeah, big step.
Yeah, that's correct. So can you tell me what is the mission of this social enterprise that you created?
So the mission of Into Ed Africa is to create purposeful enterprises that transform communities. So obviously, Miko, I've spent a very long time living and working in Africa, and my heart also remains in Africa, no matter where else I am in the world. And I've been fortunate enough to witness what has gone wrong in Africa in terms of development, and not only in Africa, in many places. And I think that charity is something that doesn't actually serve prosperity or sufficiency. And so we are about creating enterprises and teaching people to create enterprises that can therefore create their own sustainability, so they basically don't need us.
That's interesting. So next question I have, Susan, why we need to tell our children as early as possible to learn to be young social enterprise, no matter how young they are?
Yeah, so I guess I've got sort of two hats that I wear. I wear many hats, but with that, I've got two hats. So one hat is running my organization in Africa, but then the other, the hat that I wear that has created the social entrepreneurship for the children is that my son, when he was in grade 3, he came home from school and said to me, "Mum, I think I'm too stupid to go to school." And as I'd said, I'd been working in an educational field my entire life. And so I thought, okay, maybe I need to start educating my own children. So I have 4, 2 are much older and 2 are younger. And as we sort of evolved into our homeschooling and we did it quite unconventionally, we then just stumbled into education through entrepreneurship. So my son, who at the time was 10, he was desperate for us to win the lottery house in a raffle. And he really, really, really thought we were going to win it. And on the day that we didn't win it, I said to him, "What could you do to create your own money to buy your own house?" And that was sort of the birth of the entrepreneurship around the children. So he said to me, "Well, I'm a scooter rider and I love trampolining." And I said, "Okay, let's work out how to monetize that." So we created a model where we now teach other kids to use their story and do what they love and work out how to monetize it, and then have a portion of that is paid forward to something that's greater than yourself.
So greater than yourself. That's interesting.
So I think that one of the things that isn't serving children, particularly here in Australia or in a Western society, is I think we've actually gone into sort of consumer overdose. And while we actually think that giving our kids stuff and just having stuff is actually serving them, I think the high rates of depression and anxiety and suicide and mental illness is actually showing us otherwise. And I think it's showing us that those sort of external things don't actually nourish our children's soul. And so if we create a model where, and I guess I learn it from myself as we stumble along with Into It Africa as well, but when you're doing something for something that is bigger than yourself, quitting is not an option. You become resourceful, you become resilient, you learn gratitude, you learn flexibility, you learn how to pivot, all of these skills that are basic for entrepreneurship. There's just no quitting.
This podcast is brought to you by OzPad Syndicate, powered by Kangaroo Fern Media Lab. Kangaroo Fern is Australia's independent video and podcast management agency with a mission to help individuals and entrepreneurs to start their own podcasts and harness the power of podcasting. Book now via www.kangaroofern.com.
So no quitting. So that's interesting, because if you're watching on channel 9, the parental guidance, there's a tiger family who is not quitting.
Actually, I haven't watched it. I really need to watch it. And I guess I'm not sure whether I don't know their context. So I don't know whether they are not quitting out of the drive of the children and the integrity of the children, or whether that is like an external parental pressure. But I could share an example with you, because my daughter Aliyah, who is now 17, I adopted her as a baby from Kenya. And recently she had a few little issues, just sort of teenage issues with life and all of those sorts of things. And the way that we dealt with it was we really dived deep inside her and what she wanted to do and why she's here on this earth. And she ended up creating a project to eradicate period poverty from the community that she was born into in Kenya. And the way that she does that is she goes around Adelaide doing little speaking engagements. Now, Aliyah hates speaking in front of people. She also does not like being the center of attention. She was always just sort of the little wallflower, and she just liked to blend in. But as a result of what she's been doing, because she's doing something that has such a beautiful energy, obviously lots of people then start becoming much more attracted to her. and she's been asked to speak in front of 200 children at her school. She does lots of public engagements. She wins awards, and the reason why she hasn't quit is because she understands that what she's doing isn't about her. She understands that she's the conduit for the process. And so I think that's what I mean about not quitting, because sometimes we have to be mindful of, sometimes it's good to quit. Sometimes you actually need to. But when you're really clear of your purpose and why you're doing what you're doing, and that it is because of something that's bigger than yourself, then you understand you will find a solution.
So solution. So it means you need to solve a problem to do the solution.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I remember Aliyah because I think I'll attend one of the pitch night in Innovator Factory. I think it's 2 weeks ago.
Oh, you there?
Yeah. So it's about the organization that she it's very good. It's very enlightenment about the period poverty in
Well,
Kenya.
and that night was so interesting because we didn't even know it was a competition. We thought we were just going to learn how to pitch. And and so you got to feel her energy. She stood there, she completely energized that crowd. She completely had that crowd very captivated. And she still stays really grounded by it. After that event, after she'd spoken, she was sitting at the desk coloring in. It's just beautiful.
Yeah. So yeah, she's very energetic, and she knows what her mission is. So yeah, because I watched that on the pitch. So it's very, and she's very energetic, and she know what her purpose is.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really huge gift to give our children. And most children, I believe, have these entrepreneurial tendencies, and they just actually need to have somebody who will guide them to cultivate that. And I don't know if I've told you, so my son Marley, who's 12, he actually runs his own podcast. And his podcast is called 99 Seconds with Marley. So this is a child who actually rarely spoke. He was quite weak at reading. He was very poor at writing. He wasn't that great at maths, hence why he felt that he was too stupid to go to school. And as we softly brought these skills in around what he really loved, his podcast is called 99 Seconds with Marley. So it's short, sharp, and shiny. But he walks into companies, he walks into corporates, and introduces himself and says, I'm Marley from 99% Marley, and I'm here because I've got an interview with so-and-so. And he just sort of totally knows how to hold his own.
So you're saying that parents is maybe one of the trigger or guidance, so that young kids today, instead of putting their eyes on PS4 or game, instead of that, should concentrate on being an entrepreneurs?
Well, I think, yeah, you've got to be mindful. I don't think there's anything wrong with doing those games, but you've got to be mindful of whether you're doing it as a sort of a default to escape from life. And it's fine to switch off sometimes, but so Marley's business is called 99% Marley because he does what 99% of 12-year-olds don't do. So as an example, lots of those really popular video games like Fortnite, for example, he doesn't play them. So he has to be a bit of an outlier. Now, that's not to say that you can't play them, but maybe if you're, see, my kids, my youngest is only 7. My kids have the capacity to buy their own food, to pay their own rent, to buy the things that they need. And they do that by monetizing what they love. So if, for example, you're doing gaming and it's something that you love, it's then bringing that entrepreneurial element into it and going, there's something I can do with this that can create some sustainability for myself and my family.
That's a great idea. So, do you have a program for that for the young kids here in Australia?
I actually don't. I mean, we're just sort of stumbling along doing our thing. But we have been invited into a couple of schools where we've been very, very well received, and particularly schools with children who are disengaged. And I think for example, there's a program that runs in Adelaide, which is called the $20 Boss. Have you heard of it? Yeah. And so we were invited to go in and speak and teach these children how to become $20 bosses. And so we had our formula of choose what you love and then work out how you're going to monetize it. And for me, the really important element is then, and what percentage are you paying forward? So one of the students in one school, he came up to me and said, Susan, I really want to make pancakes. So he had his $20 and I was like, fantastic. We can get a really great profit margin from pancakes, right? And the school that he was at, there was a kitchen. So he had free access to all of the materials. And, you can literally buy enough pancake mixture for $5 and sell a pancake for $4 and make 30 pancakes. So you've got a great profit margin there. And people are always hungry. They want to eat food. He had the kitchen at his school. He also had lots of hungry teenage boys at his school who would buy from him. And then he said to me, and what I'd really like to do is pay the money forward for suicide prevention, because that's something that's close to my heart. And I went, you've just mastered it. You've really mastered the concept. And then I said to him, okay, so then I need to come back and teach you how to do a podcast, because then your voice will be heard as well. And in that moment, I've subsequently seen that boy, and, that just changed his life. And it's simple. Yeah, it's really simple. And the other interesting thing about it for my children is my children use the Barefoot Investor model of the 3 envelopes, and they have their splurge, their save, and their give envelopes. And so when they do a market stall or however they've generated some money, their money is then divided, and that's completely decided by them. And it's fascinating to watch, because all 3 of them, but, my 7-year-old, to watch her have $50 in her hand and then divide it 3 ways and go, well, you know what? In my splurge envelope, I actually only need $5. So I'm going to put $5 there, and then I'm going to put the balance into my save and give. And it's just so fascinating when they have their own autonomy over their own money, because they understand that there's enough.
That's interesting, and you should do a program for that for the young kids nowadays.
Yeah, we might end up doing that. Absolutely.
It's a good challenge to them, and it's sort of because on the traditional business, if you're setting up a business, traditionally you have to get a profit for your business. But what you're saying now, you get your profit, but you're gonna set aside for a social project like suicide prevention or helping others. So now it's becoming social enterprise instead of business and profit.
And what it means, so for example, with our organisation Into Africa, my children came to Kenya. We went together in 2019 and we built 2 schools. And that's because my kids also have Kenyan heritage. And so that's something that is very close to us. But what happens, my children don't lack anything by paying their profits forward. In fact, what happens is they gain. So Marley, for example, he buys his own scooters. So he's a scooter rider. He loves scooter riding. So from his splurge, he can budget his splurge to buy what he wants. Then from his save, he uses that to reinvest into stock, and then also to save if for bigger purchases. But then he has this give section, and the give section goes towards development projects that we run in Africa. And so what it does is it actually teaches adults, my goodness, if these kids can do it, and you can actually see the beautiful energy that profit is generating. You know, we've come from a society where we've actually been taught to hoard money. We're taught here in Australia, we're taught to hoard everything. Yeah, we're taught to hoard money, and we're taught to hoard things. And actually, it's sort of like a river. If a river is stagnant, the water becomes toxic and it's not life-sustaining. And it's almost like money. It's very similar to money, the energy of money. And whereas if we actually keep it flowing, and we keep it to designing to spread that energy and to create more energy, then it just keeps flowing.
Yeah, that's interesting. Flowing instead of something blocking on
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, that's really it. Because and a river is a beautiful analogy of water, because, you know, water is actually a currency. Money is actually a currency, and it holds a frequency. And so particularly from the work that I do in Africa, I see that when you hoard it, when you're hoarding that energy within the money, it becomes toxic, and just like water.
Instead of hoarding, just give it to a good project.
Well, that's it. Or create your own project. It's all also connected to a personal growth story, because you have to understand that there is enough in the world, and so my kids also have to understand, and socially we're not really raised to believe that there's enough. We're always raised to believe that there's not enough, so we're constantly scrambling for more and more and more. Whereas if we flip that on our head, I think it creates so much more peace and tranquility, and it actually enables you to live a very, very fulfilling life.
Yep. So fulfilling life once you say fulfill your objective.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, when you are of service to somebody else, you're full. And that's free. You know, that's free. So it's just being mindful of it. I think one of the other things that we've done that sort of flipped lots of that mainstream ideology around is, instead of, and I guess this connects into children being entrepreneurs, is instead of asking my children, what do you want to be when you grow up, which is what most of us do, I ask them, what do you want to be now? And so then, and that shifts everything as well. So, and I remember when I asked it to my 7-year-old, she was already making soaps, and she was making candles, and she was selling them. And she said to me, I want to do everything I already do, but I want to add fashion design. So I gave her a sketchbook, and she created a collection of sketches. And then I found some material that I'd had from 20 years prior in Africa. And she now has a fashion collection that she models around Adelaide. You know, so it's like, why do we have to wait? We don't actually have to wait. We don't have to wait until we finish school or finish university or finish something in order to be something. There's nothing stopping anyone from being an entrepreneur at the age of 5. Kids are actually much more intuitively entrepreneurial than adults.
So you're saying just started?
Yes, I think, I mean, I've had to, as a parent of children who are going on this journey while I've been going on it myself, and I haven't come from any sort of a corporate background, I've had to learn a lot of steps along the way. But I also had to be very open to the facilitation of their process. So I had to actually take my own judgment out of it. Like Amalia, my little one, she's hilarious because now she basically sells everything. So if she draws a picture, she'll be like, I'm going to sell this for $5. And but then I said to her, okay, so you've done this picture or you've done this artwork. So why not set up an art exhibition and invite people over to have a look at it, and people pay a gold coin donation, and then you pay that money forward to something. So as the adult, you have to be the facilitator.
Yeah, that's true. So what was the one thing or handful of things that say really help your business to take off?
My business is still in its beginner phases. So my actual business in Africa we opened our schools in 2019 in January, and they closed in March because of the pandemic. So it literally set us back. However, what I think is the most important is doing what you know to the core of your being activates you. I think that that's really important. I've done lots and lots of businesses in Africa and in the Middle East, and I came to the conclusion the hard way that you actually have to do what really, really activates you. And it's not up here, it's actually deep inside your heart. And when you're very clear of that, the other thing that I think is very important is having the right people around you. And quite often you learn who the right people are by going through the wrong people. And I've had lots of people steal from me. I've had all sorts of crazy things happen. And I'm very grateful for that, because when that happens and those people clear out of your path, it opens the way for you to do some more work on yourself, and then the right people come in.
Right. That's interesting. So if you have a billboard to write one short piece of advice to all our listeners and who is watching right now, what would you say to them?
That's a great question. I'm sure everybody tells you that's a great question. This too will pass.
Can you elaborate that?
This too will pass. It's nothing is ever permanent. So there's no guarantees. And when you understand that there isn't anything permanent, you enjoy every single moment. So we make sure every single thing we do is fun. If it's not fun, we don't do it. And that's my entire team as well. If there's something that we want to do, that we need to do, and it isn't fun, we don't do it.
I agree.
Because even with that, there's some things that I won't find that are particularly fun. But if I've got the right people in place, somebody else, like let's say accounting, I don't find that particularly fun, but someone else will go, that's great. So everything will still get done if you've got the right people and if you understand that nothing is permanent.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Susan Knapp. Thank you for your time. And that's it for our episode Tribe Podcast under Osfood Syndicate. And hope to see you again in 2 weeks' time. This is Miko Santos. Enjoy. See ya.
This podcast is brought to you by OSPAD Syndicate, powered by Kangaroo Fern Media Lab. Kangaroo Fern is Australia's independent video and podcast management agency with a mission to help individuals and entrepreneurs to start their own podcast and harness the power of podcasting. Book now via www.kangaroofern.com.